They say Mother's Day is for gratitude, for honoring the woman who gave everything. But when I arrived, wearing my best blouse and clutching hand-knitted gifts, they sat me in the garage beside old paint cans and broken chairs. "She's used to scraps," my daughter-in-law laughed. My son stayed silent. I smiled, ate off a paper plate, and left without a word. What they didn't know? I paid for the brunch. I still held the mortgage. That night, I made 2 quiet calls. What happened next? You won't believe it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. I'll tell you about the last $20 I ever spent on my son. It was a Mother's Day brunch I'd paid for but never got to enjoy. Not really. People say age is just a number, but at 72, numbers are what I understand best. 49 years as Derek's mother, 23 years a widow, 37 years on the factory floor at Midland Textiles, and $30,000 of my life savings quietly transferred into my son's mortgage. On that Sunday morning, I unwrapped each hand-knitted scarf I'd made for the guests. 12 in total, each taking nearly 14 hours. My arthritic fingers ached with a familiar pain, the same ache that followed me through decades of overtime shifts and second jobs. I'd chosen yarn in colors matching what Camilla called her spring aesthetic. The scrap of magazine she'd left at my apartment during her last brief visit sat propped against my mirror, my guide to what might finally please her. "You're running late." Derek's voice sounded strained through the phone. "Camilla's getting anxious. The caterers are already setting up." "I'm just waiting for the bus," I said, though I'd been ready for hours. The 9:15 never showed, so I'd have to take the 10:20. The neighborhood had changed. Buses didn't keep schedules like they used to. I paid them for the full 4 hours. Tell Camilla not to worry. A pause. "You didn't need to do that, Mom." But I had done it. $2,700 for the catering, $800 for the flowers, $500 for the photographer who would capture everyone but me. I'd kept the receipts tucked inside my purse, not to remind him, but to remind myself that my contribution still mattered. The restaurant overlooked the river, Hartwell's, where Derek proposed to Camilla 6 years ago. The hostess smiled when I gave my name. "The Driscoll party," I said, pride warm in my chest. "I'm the mother." She led me through the dining room past tables of families celebrating their matriarchs. Women younger than me wearing corsages, grandmothers surrounded by 3 generations. I'd worn my best blouse, pale blue, found at the church donation center but carefully tailored to hide its humble origins. The tissue-wrapped scarves filled my oversized handbag, the weight of them a comfort. I spotted Derek first, his father's profile, my chin, laughing with Camilla's college friends. Nico sat looking at his phone, his 17-year-old frame already taller than his father's. Camilla was arranging place cards when she spotted me. "Oh, Lorraine, you're here." Her voice carried just enough warmth to satisfy those listening, but her eyes slid past me to check on the waitstaff. "We had to start without you." "The bus was late," I began, but she was already turning, gesturing to the server. "We're actually at capacity at the main table," she said, voice dropping. "With my friends coming and the Jenkins bringing their new baby. I've had Ella set you up somewhere quiet." The young server looked uncomfortable. "Right this way, ma'am." I followed her not to another table in the dining room, but through a swinging door, past the restrooms, down a short hallway, and into what appeared to be a converted storage space. One folding chair sat beside a stack of extra chairs. A small utility table held a plastic cup of water, and a rolled paper napkin. The kitchen will bring your food soon," the server said, eyes not meeting mine. "I'm sorry, there's not enough." "It's perfectly fine," I assured her, settling my bag on the concrete floor. "Thank you, dear." She hesitated, glancing at the exposed water heater in the corner, the shelves of cleaning supplies. "I can try to find another spot in the main room." "No need to cause trouble. I'll be just fine." After she left, I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap. The room smelled of bleach and damp. Through the thin wall I could hear laughter, the clink of crystal, the murmur of conversation. My son's voice occasionally rose above others, telling stories I'd lived through but somehow never recognized in his retellings. The door swung open. Derek peered in, his expression a mixture of guilt and relief. "Mom, I'm sorry about this. Camilla just... You know how she gets with her events." "It's lovely," I said. "Just being included is enough." Behind him, Camilla appeared, champagne flute in hand. "Oh, good. You're settled in." Her eyes swept over my modest outfit, the bag at my feet. "Derek, the Prestons just arrived." Derek glanced between us. "Coming. Mom, your food will be along." "She's used to scraps anyway, aren't you, Lorraine?" Camilla whispered as she pulled Derek away. "Factory workers learn to be resourceful." I'd worked factory floors since I was 17. I'd handled scalding steam presses that left permanent scars on my forearms. I'd stood the 12-hour shifts when pneumonia made each breath feel like swallowing glass. But something in the casual cruelty of her words, and in my son's silence that followed, burned hotter than any industrial press. I sat alone for 43 minutes by my watch before a plate arrived. The salmon cooling, the asparagus limp. The server couldn't quite look at me, but I thanked her and ate methodically, the way I'd eaten during my 18-minute lunch breaks for decades. Each bite tasted of nothing. When I finished, I applied fresh lipstick using a compact mirror, smoothed my hair, and gathered my dignity with my purse. I entered the main room where dessert was being served. Sunlight streamed through windows overlooking the river. Crystal caught the light. Flowers perfumed the air. Every detail I'd paid for surrounded my family while I had sat next to buckets and mops. "Lorraine, here she is," Camilla called, voice theatrical. Everyone, my mother-in-law, finally joined us. Faces turned, some confused, others uncomfortable. Nico's eyes widened, a question in them as he looked between his mother and me. "I brought gifts," I said simply, removing the scarves from my bag. I distributed them one by one, explaining the unique pattern of each, the hours of work. Camilla's smile never reached her eyes as she accepted hers. "How homemade," she said. "Very crafty." "Grandma, this is really nice," Nico said, running his fingers over the intricate stitches of his deep blue scarf. "You didn't have to." "Don't encourage her, Nico," Camilla murmured. "She'll be knitting you tube socks next." Derek laughed, that nervous laugh that had followed him since elementary school, when bullies made him their target. "Mom's always been good with her hands." "Yes, well," I said, still standing while everyone else remained seated. "I should be going. The buses run less frequently on Sundays." "You're leaving?" Derek asked, not rising. "But we haven't done the toast yet." I looked at my son, truly looked at him, and saw not the boy I'd raised, but the man he'd become. A man who could watch his mother eat alone in a garage while he sipped champagne. A man who could hear his wife's cruelty and respond with laughter. "I've seen enough," I said softly. "Thank you for including me." Outside, the spring air felt clean against my face. I walked to the bus stop, my pace unhurried even as emotion threatened to choke me. The river flowed past beyond the restaurant's windows, carrying everything downstream. I sat on the bench, removed a small notebook from my purse, and began writing down numbers, amounts, dates, account details. Sometimes a lifetime of giving reaches its natural end. Sometimes a mother must teach her final lesson with the same tools she's always used: patience, sacrifice, and the quiet authority that comes from knowing exactly what you're owed. By the time the bus arrived, I knew precisely what needed to be done. Telling and preparing this story took us a lot of time, so if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The bus lurched forward, carrying me away from Hartwell's. My purse felt heavier now, though I'd left all those scarves behind. Weight can come from resolve as much as yarn, I've found. The elderly man across the aisle nodded with the familiar recognition of someone else whose children had better things to do on holidays. I nodded back, our silent fellowship requiring no words. My apartment building looked particularly gray as the bus pulled away. The concrete steps had cracked further over winter, and no one had planted the usual marigolds around the mailboxes yet. My home for 17 years, 2 rooms, and a kitchenette on the 3rd floor, was exactly 8 blocks from the factory where I'd worked until retirement. Close enough to walk when the weather permitted, saving bus fare for Derek's college textbooks or his first apartment deposit. My door still stuck in the humidity. I'd never bothered the landlord about it. Inside, the room smelled of lemon cleaner and wool. Everything neat, everything modest. The only luxury was the oversized armchair by the window where I did my knitting, a garage sale find I'd reupholstered myself. The springs creaked as I sank into it, finally letting my shoulders slump. On the wall hung my only decoration of real value, a shadow box containing Derek's college diploma, first in our family. I'd worked double shifts 6 days a week for 5 years to make that happen. There were nights I'd fallen asleep standing up at the pressing machine, the foreman looking the other way because my quotas were always met. "You'll have opportunities I never had," I'd told Derek when I handed him his acceptance letter, along with a check that emptied my account. I didn't tell him I'd pawned my wedding band to cover the deposit. My fingers trembled slightly as I reached for the folder I kept in my bedside drawer. Inside were bank statements, legal documents, and the mortgage agreement I'd signed 3 years ago. The clause was on page 4, paragraph 3. In consideration of financial contribution exceeding 30% of purchase price, Lorraine A. Driscoll maintains 51% ownership interest until such time as... Mr. Muir, my late husband's friend from the Knights of Columbus, had insisted on the clause. "You're putting your entire retirement into that house, Lorraine. You need protection." I'd almost refused. What mother needs protection from her own child? But today, that protection felt like the only warmth in a suddenly cold world. Next came the brunch receipts, copies I'd made before placing the originals in my purse. The venue contract listed me as the financially responsible party, with all cancellation rights explicitly in my name. Even the shower Camilla had planned for next month. I'd quietly put down the deposits for that too. I picked up my phone and dialed the number that, in my younger years, I'd been too proud to call. "Patrice," I said when she answered. "It's Lorraine. I wonder if you might come over for some tea." 20 minutes later, Patrice Solano sat in my kitchen, her vivid purple blouse bringing the only color to my apartment. We'd been neighbors for 12 years, though friendship came slower to women who'd spent decades keeping to themselves. "I knew something would happen," she said, stirring sugar into a cup. "The way that girl talked about you at the Christmas potluck, like you were some kind of quaint museum exhibit." I always thought it was my fault somehow, I admitted. That if I'd been more sophisticated, less working class, she might have accepted me. Patrice snorted. People like Camilla don't accept. They tolerate until they no longer have to. She leaned forward. So what happened today that has you calling me over? You never call. I told her everything. The garage, the scraps comment, Derek's silence. The words came slowly at first, then in a rush, like water breaking through a dam I hadn't known existed. Lord in heaven, Patrice whispered when I finished. And you paid for the whole thing? Every cent. What are you going to do? I looked down at the documents spread across my small kitchen table. I'm going to make 2 phone calls. Patrice's eyes narrowed, then widened as understanding dawned. The mortgage. Yes. And the venue contracts. Those 2. She reached across the table and covered my hand with hers. Lorraine Driscoll. Look at you discovering your backbone at 72. I managed a smile. Better late than never. After Patrice left, I sat by my window watching dusk settle over the neighborhood. The streetlights flickered on one by one, just as they had when Derek was small, and I'd point them out to him. Look, the city is saying goodnight. So many small moments of wonder I'd created from nothing. So many sacrifices rendered invisible. My phone buzzed with a text from Nico. Sorry about today, Grandma. Mom was stressed. I held the phone, considering my response. Nico was the only one who'd seemed to notice the wrongness of it all. Perhaps the generational chain could still be broken. No apology needed, I texted back. Some things can't be mended with words. It was fully dark when I made the first call. Mr. Muir, it's Lorraine Driscoll. I need to invoke the ownership clause in my son's mortgage. Yes, tomorrow if possible. The second call was briefer. Hartwell's Events, please. This is Lorraine Driscoll. I need to cancel a reservation for next month. The Driscoll baby shower. Yes, all deposits will be forfeit. That's acceptable. I hung up and looked again at my diploma shadow box. All those years of work, of believing sacrifice, equaled love. Perhaps it did, but love without respect was just servitude, and I had served long enough. That night I slept better than I had in years, dreamless and deep. Tomorrow would bring consequences, but tonight I was simply Lorraine. Not mother, not mother-in-law, not the family ATM. Just a woman who had finally said, enough. The morning after Mother's Day dawned with unusual clarity. I woke before my alarm, made my tea stronger than usual, and sat watching the sunrise paint my kitchen wall, golden. There was something different about the quality of light, or perhaps it was something different about me. My phone remained silent. No apologetic text from Derek. No fake cheerful message from Camilla pretending yesterday hadn't happened. By 9 o'clock, the wheels I'd set in motion were already turning. Mr. Muir called first, his voice formal as always. Paperwork's been filed, Lorraine. Electronic notification should reach Derek by noon. The foreclosure process officially begins today. Thank you, Eldon. I appreciate your efficiency. If I may... He hesitated. I've known you since Robert was alive. This isn't like you. Yesterday wasn't like Derek either, I replied. People change. After hanging up, I dressed carefully. Not in my usual house dress, but in slacks and a cardigan Patrice had given me last Christmas. Something with a little color, she'd insisted. The teal blue made my eyes look less faded. Today I wanted to recognize myself in the mirror. The doorbell rang at 10:37. Nico stood in the hallway, still in his school uniform, clearly having skipped his morning classes. Grandma, what's happening? Dad's freaking out. He got some kind of mortgage notice. I gestured him inside. "Would you like some tea, sweetheart?" He sat at my kitchen table, gangly limbs folded awkwardly, looking both older and younger than his 17 years. "Mom's crying. Dad can't reach the bank. What's going on?" I poured him tea in my second-best cup. "The house is being foreclosed. Your parents have 30 days to vacate or negotiate new terms." "But why? They always pay the mortgage." "They pay the bank, yes. But I own 51% of that house. My name is on the deed." Nico's mouth opened, closed. "I don't understand." 3 years ago, when they couldn't qualify for the mortgage they wanted, I contributed my retirement savings and co-signed the loan. They've been living in my house while treating me like someone who belongs in a garage. His face flushed. "That was messed up, what Mom did." "I should have said something." "Yes, you should have." I met his gaze. "But your father should have said something too." My phone buzzed, Derek's face appearing on screen. I declined the call. "They're panicking," Nico said. "And some venue called Mom about the baby shower being cancelled. She was screaming about deposits." "I paid for that too," I said simply. "All of it. Every Mother's Day brunch. Every Christmas gift from your parents. Your private school tuition until 10th grade. I've been the invisible foundation of your family's financial house of cards." Nico stared into his teacup. "I had no idea." "That was the point. Your father was ashamed of needing help. Your mother was ashamed of where the help came from." I reached across the table to touch his hand. "But I was never ashamed of helping. That's what mothers do." "What happens now? Now they face consequences." My phone buzzed again, this time with Camilla's number. I silenced it completely. "What should I tell them?" Nico asked, standing to leave. "Tell them." I considered my words carefully. "Tell them that garage seats come with a price." After Nico left, the calls came relentlessly. Derek, Camilla, numbers. I didn't recognize that must have been her parents. I turned off my phone and spent the afternoon cleaning my apartment, organizing my modest closet, and calculating exactly how much I could offer for the small garden-level unit that had just gone up for sale 3 blocks away. Patrice came by at 4, carrying a bottle of the sweet rosé we sometimes shared on her balcony. "It's happening," she said, not bothering with a greeting. "The whole building's talking about it. Camilla was seen screaming at the manager at Hartwell's. Derek's car has been parked outside the bank for hours." "And how do you feel about that?" I asked as I found glasses. "Me? I'm enjoying the show." She poured wine for both of us. "But the real question is how you feel." I sat, considering. "Lighter," I finally said, like I've set down something I've been carrying too long. The evening news played softly in the background as we talked. Plans for my new place if I got it. Patrice's upcoming cataract surgery. The community garden we'd both joined this spring. Normal conversations in a life that suddenly felt more honest. When Patrice left, I finally turned my phone back on to find 17 voicemails and 32 text messages. I listened to just one. From Derek, his voice breaking. "Mom, please, we need to talk. I don't understand what's happening. The bank says we have to come up with the full balance or vacate. That's almost $300,000. Mom, this isn't funny. Call me." I didn't. Instead, I deleted all the messages without listening and prepared for bed. As I washed my face, I studied my reflection, the lines around my eyes, the softness beneath my chin, the gray hair I'd stopped dyeing 5 years ago when the chemicals made my hands break out. This face had weathered so much. Robert's death, factory closures, Midnight ER visits when Derek had pneumonia, endless double shifts, and now this final betrayal. Yet it was still my face, still Lorraine. For the first time in decades, I smiled at my reflection. Not the placating smile I'd worn at Sunday's brunch, but something real. Tomorrow would bring more chaos. Tomorrow Derek might finally come in person. Tomorrow I would need to be stronger still. But tonight I slept like a woman who'd taken back her power, $1 and one legal clause at a time. The knock came at exactly 8:17 the next morning. 3 sharp raps, followed by silence. I knew it was Derek before I opened the door. He'd knocked that way since he was tall enough to reach the doorknob. I'd been awake since 5, already dressed in my navy slacks and a white blouse I'd ironed the night before. Not my usual attire for a Tuesday morning, but this wasn't a usual Tuesday. "Mom," Derek said when I opened the door. His hair was uncombed, his eyes rimmed with red. He held a stack of papers. The foreclosure notice, I presumed. "What is this? What are you doing?" "I think you know exactly what it is," I replied, not stepping aside to let him in. "Can we please talk about this?" I considered him for a moment. This man who'd watched his mother eat alone in a garage, without a word of protest. "Not here," I said finally. "Meet me at Gina's diner in an hour." "Mom, please. 1 hour. Gina's." I closed the door gently but firmly. I packed my documents carefully into my old leather satchel, the one I'd used to carry lunch to the factory for 37 years. Each paper represented a piece of myself I'd given away. Mortgage statements, venue contracts, tuition receipts, canceled checks for everything from Nico's braces to the down payment on Derek's first car. Patrice was waiting in the lobby. "Need backup?" "No," I said. "This is between me and my son." "Well, if you need a getaway driver," she winked. "I may be 70, but I still remember how to burn rubber." Gina's diner sat at the corner of Main and Elm, its windows steamy with breakfast aromas. I'd been coming here every Tuesday morning for 15 years, ever since Robert died. The waitresses knew my order by heart. 1 egg over medium, wheat toast dry, coffee black. Derek was already there when I arrived, seated in a booth at the back. He stood when he saw me, a courteous reflex that seemed hollow now. "Mom." His voice wavered. I sat across from him, placed my satchel on the bench beside me. The waitress approached. "Morning, Lorraine. The usual." "Yes, thank you, Rita." "And for you, sir?" Derek shook his head. "Just coffee." Once she left, silence stretched between us. I waited, letting him speak first. "Is this because of Sunday?" he finally asked. "Because I can talk to Camilla. She'll apologize. We can fix this." I opened my satchel and removed the first document, the original mortgage agreement with my signature beside his, the clause about my 51% ownership highlighted in yellow. "Do you remember when you called me 3 years ago? You and Camilla had found your dream home, but the bank wouldn't approve the full amount. You were devastated." He shifted uncomfortably. "I remember. I gave you $30,000, my entire retirement fund apart from Social Security. I'm not wealthy, Derek. I worked the floor at Midland Textiles for almost 4 decades. That money represented every extra shift, every skipped lunch, every winter I kept the thermostat at 62 degrees. I placed the next document on the table, a spreadsheet I'd maintained for years. Since Camilla came into your life, I've contributed $73,422 to your household. Christmas gifts you claimed were from you. Nico's braces, his school trips, the down payment on your car, and yes, every special occasion Camilla has hosted, including Sunday's brunch where I was seated in a garage. Derek paled. I didn't know she was going to do that, I swear. But you didn't stop it either, did you? I kept my voice level. You laughed when she said I was used to scraps. I didn't laugh. I was uncomfortable. Your discomfort doesn't excuse your silence. The waitress brought our drinks. I took a sip of coffee, letting the bitterness ground me. What do you want, Mom? Money? We can start paying you back. This isn't about money. Then what? I met his eyes directly. Respect, recognition, the basic dignity of being treated as a person who matters. Derek ran his hands through his hair, the same gesture he'd made as a teenager when caught in a lie. Of course you matter. You're my mother. A fact you seem to remember only when you need something. I laid out one more document, the catering bill for Sunday's brunch. $2,700. That's what I paid so Camilla could host a Mother's Day celebration where I was hidden away like something shameful. His coffee sat untouched, cooling. What happens now? Are you really going to make us homeless? Nico lives there too, your grandson. You have options, I said, keeping my voice steady. You can secure alternate financing within 30 days. You can sell the house and keep whatever equity exceeds my investment. Or you can vacate. We can't get that kind of money in 30 days. Camilla's parents won't help. They're furious about the baby shower cancellation. That's a difficult situation, I acknowledged. But it's your situation to solve. My breakfast arrived. I ate methodically, the way I'd learned to do during brief factory breaks. Derek watched in silence, his expression cycling through disbelief, anger, and finally, just as I finished my toast, something like understanding. I've taken you for granted, he said quietly. Yes. And Camilla has been unkind. Yes. He reached for my hand, but I kept both of mine wrapped around my coffee mug. We can fix this. Please, Mom. Tell me how to fix this. I considered his question seriously, looking at this man I'd raised alone. This person I'd sacrificed everything for, who had somehow grown into someone who could watch his mother being humiliated and say nothing. Some things can't be fixed with an apology and a promise, I said finally. Some lessons need to be felt to be learned. So that's it? 40 years of being my mother and now you're just done? The question struck deeper than he knew. Was I done? Could a mother ever truly be done? I'm not done being your mother, I said. But I am done being your safety net without your respect. I closed my satchel and placed enough cash on the table to cover both our orders. As I stood to leave, Derek grabbed my wrist. Mom, please, Camilla's pregnant. We need the house. I gently but firmly removed his hand. You chose her silence over my sacrifice. Now you'll live with that choice. Walking out of Gina's diner, I felt the weight of Derek's stare on my back, but I didn't turn. The morning air felt fresh against my face after the diner's warmth. Down the street, I could see the real estate office where I had an appointment in 20 minutes about the garden-level unit. My phone buzzed with a text from Patrice. How did it go? I typed back, exactly as expected. For the first time in decades, I wasn't carrying anyone's burdens but my own. The sensation was strange. Lighter, certainly, but tinged with a sorrow I hadn't anticipated. Motherhood had defined me for so long. Who was I without the constant giving, the endless sacrifice? Just Lorraine, I supposed. 72 years old, and finally learning to stand alone. There was something terrifying in that thought, and something exhilarating too. The real estate office door chimed as I entered, right on time for my appointment. Time to build something new. Something just for me. The garden-level apartment was everything I'd hoped for. 2 bedrooms instead of 1, a small patio where I could plant herbs, and best of all, no stairs for my increasingly troublesome knees. As I signed the purchase agreement using cashier's checks drawn from my foreclosure proceedings, I felt an unfamiliar lightness. The real estate agent seemed surprised when I didn't need mortgage approval. "It's nice to see a senior citizen with such solid financial footing," she commented, handing me the keys. I almost corrected her. I hadn't been financially solid until I stopped supporting everyone else. But instead I simply smiled and said, "I've been planning this for longer than you might think." 3 days had passed since my diner conversation with Derek. 3 days of silenced calls, of messages left unheard, of finally putting myself first. Patrice had helped me start packing my small apartment, each dish and book wrapped carefully in newspaper. We worked in comfortable quiet, sorting through 47 years of accumulated life. "Look at this," she said, holding up a construction paper card. "Did Derek make this?" The faded card showed a stick figure woman with yellow yarn hair. "Happy Mother's Day" was written in childish script, the letters uneven but earnest, inside a poem. "Roses are red, violets are blue, no one works harder or loves me like you." 3rd grade, I said, a catch in my throat. "He won a creative writing certificate that year." Patrice set it in the keep pile without comment. We both understood that erasing the past wasn't the point, only rewriting the future. The doorbell rang at exactly 6:30 that evening. I expected Patrice with the promised Chinese takeout. Instead, I found Nico standing in the hallway, a backpack slung over his shoulder. "Grandma," he said simply. His eyes were red-rimmed. "Can I come in?" I stood aside, noticing how he ducked slightly to enter, always conscious of his height in my small spaces, just like his grandfather had been. "I brought something," he said, pulling a paper bag from his backpack. "Mom doesn't know I took it." Inside was a faded photograph in a silver frame. Me holding newborn Nico, Derek beaming beside us. One of those hospital photos I'd paid for but never received a copy of. "I found it in the attic," Nico said. "They were packing boxes, and I saw this in a stack of stuff being thrown out." My fingers traced the glass. "You were so small. 6 pounds, 8 ounces. "They're saying awful things about you," he blurted. "Mom keeps calling you names. Dad just drinks. They're fighting all the time." I gestured toward the sofa. "Sit, please." He collapsed into it, suddenly looking every bit the child he still partly was. "The house is a mess. Mom's parents won't return her calls about a loan. Dad's boss called today. He's missed work twice this week." I made tea, the ritual giving my hands something to do while my heart adjusted to the reality of what I'd set in motion. Consequences had ripples. I'd known that, intellectually, but seeing Nico's distress made it tangible. "Are you okay?" I asked, handing him a mug. "No." He looked up at me. "But I get why you did it. Sunday was... it was cruel. And I didn't say anything. I'm sorry." "You're 17, Nico. It wasn't your responsibility to correct your parents." "But I knew it was wrong." He stared into his tea. "I've always known how they treat you is wrong." We sat in silence, the weight of his admission settling between us. Finally, I asked, "Why did you come tonight?" "I wanted you to know I see you," he said. "And I wanted to ask if I can stay here, just for a bit, until they figure things out." My small apartment, half-packed, barely had room for my own life, let alone a 6'2" teenager. But looking at his face, Robert's eyes, Derek's chin, my own determined jawline, I couldn't refuse. "The sofa pulls out," I said. "It's not comfortable, but it's perfect." he interrupted. Thank you. That night, after Nico had fallen asleep, I sat by my window watching the streetlights flicker on, just as I had when Derek was young. The photograph Nico had brought sat on my lap, evidence of a moment when everything had seemed full of promise. In the silvery darkness, I let myself remember all the good parts. Teaching Derek to ride a bicycle, bandaging skinned knees, cheering at baseball games, the pride in his eyes when he got his first paycheck. My phone buzzed with a text from Derek. Nico's missing. Have you seen him? I typed back. He's safe. He's with me. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. Finally. Don't turn him against us. The unfairness of the accusation stung. I'd spent decades telling Derek only good things about his father, even when Robert had failed us both. I'd spoken well of Camilla even when her slights accumulated like pebbles in my shoe. I'd always been the peacekeeper, the one who made excuses, who smoothed rough edges. Never the one who demanded accountability. Nico makes his own judgments, I wrote back, just as you do. I turned off my phone and went to bed. Morning found Nico already awake, the sofa bed neatly made, coffee brewing in my ancient pot. He'd set the small table with mismatched dishes from my cupboard. I hope it's okay, he said. I thought you might like breakfast ready. I studied him, this child who'd somehow grown into someone more considerate than his parents. It's more than okay. It's lovely. We ate toast and eggs in companionable silence. Finally, Nico spoke. I'm supposed to register for college classes next fall. Dad always said they had a fund. But now... The unspoken question hung in the air. College had been Derek's dream too, one I'd sacrificed to make possible. Your education matters, I said carefully. Whatever happens between me and your parents won't change that. His shoulders relaxed slightly. Thank you. After breakfast, I showed him the papers for my new apartment. 2 bedrooms, I pointed out. One could be yours if you need it. For holidays or summers or longer. The look on his face, surprise mingled with gratitude, reminded me so much of Derek when he was young that my heart ached. How had I raised a son who grew into a man who could dismiss me so easily? Where had I gone wrong? But looking at Nico, perhaps I hadn't failed entirely. Perhaps the legacy of care could skip a generation, finding more fertile ground. The doorbell rang again, this time Patrice with the promised Chinese food, a day late. Oh, she said, seeing Nico. I didn't realize you had company. My grandson, I said with quiet pride. He's staying with me for a while. The 3 of us ate takeout from cartons, laughing at Patrice's stories about her online dating adventures. He said he was 65 and an entrepreneur. Turned out he was 73 and sold homemade jerky at flea markets. For a moment, it felt like family. Chosen family, but family nonetheless. After Patrice left, Nico helped me sort through more boxes. We found Derek's baby book, my wedding album, Robert's fishing tackle box that I'd never been able to discard. You keep everything, Nico observed, turning the pages of an ancient photo album. Factory workers learn to be resourceful, I said, deliberately echoing Camilla's cruel words but draining them of their poison. Nothing gets wasted. Mom said you grew up poor. Not poor, I corrected. Working class. There's a difference. Poor is having nothing. Working class is having exactly what you've earned. No more, no less. He considered this. Dad never talks about growing up. He was happy, I said, because it was true. We didn't have much, but he never went to bed hungry. He had books and baseball and birthday cakes I stayed up until midnight baking. You never told me that part. No one ever asked. We continued sorting. Keep, donate, discard. Lives catalogued in cardboard boxes. With each item, I told Nico a story. The blue sweater I wore when Derek won his 5th grade spelling bee. The chipped mug that had been Robert's favorite. The Mother's Day cards Derek had made faithfully until he turned 15 and decided he was too old for construction paper hearts. It was nearly midnight when Nico asked, "Will you ever forgive them?" I set down the book I was wrapping in newspaper, a first edition of Little Women I'd saved 3 months to buy for my own mother decades ago. "Forgiveness isn't the issue," I said carefully. "Respect is. Your father and mother need to understand that I'm not just a resource to be used and hidden away when inconvenient. I'm a person with feelings and dignity. But if they apologize, if they really mean it?" I looked at my grandson, so earnest, so hopeful that broken things could be mended. "If they show real change," I said finally, "there's always possibility." The next morning, a certified letter arrived from Derek's lawyer. Inside was a formal request for an extension of the foreclosure timeline, citing family hardship and the presence of a minor child in the home. The impersonal language, the failure to acknowledge the root cause of our rift, felt like another slap. I called Mr. Muir immediately. "No extension," I said firmly. "The timeline stands as is." "Lorraine," he cautioned, "courts often favor families with children. If they file a counterclaim—" "They won't," I interrupted. "Derek knows exactly why this is happening. He won't want that made public." Later that afternoon, as Nico and I were carrying donation bags to my car, a familiar SUV pulled into the parking lot. Camilla stepped out, her normally perfect appearance distinctly disheveled. She spotted us immediately. "Nico, get in the car, now." He stiffened beside me. "No." "Don't be ridiculous. We've been worried sick." She turned her glare toward me. "I should have known you'd try to turn him against us." "Hello, Camilla," I said calmly. Nico came to me. "He's welcome to leave whenever he wishes." "You've ruined everything," she hissed, stepping closer. "Our house, the shower. Derek's barely functioning. Are you happy now?" I set my bag down carefully. "This isn't about happiness. It's about consequences." "Consequences? For what? Not treating you like the Queen of England at brunch? Get over yourself." Nico stepped between us. "Mom, stop. You know what you did was wrong." Camilla blinked, clearly unused to her son contradicting her. "Stay out of this, Nico. This is between adults." "Then act like one," he replied quietly. Something shifted in Camilla's expression. Surprise, then calculation. She smoothed her hair, straightened her shoulders. "Fine. Lorraine, can we speak privately, please?" I glanced at Nico, who nodded slightly. "I'll finish loading the car," he said. Camilla and I walked to a bench near the building's entrance. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, she broke the silence. "What will it take to stop the foreclosure?" No apology, no acknowledgement, just negotiation. I shouldn't have been surprised. "It's not about money," I began. "Everything's about money," she interrupted. "Just name your price. We'll figure it out." I studied her, this woman who had married my son, given me my only grandchild, and somehow never seen me as fully human. "The price," I said carefully, "is respect. Recognition of my humanity. A relationship where I'm not hidden away when inconvenient." She sighed impatiently. "Fine, I apologize for the brunch seating. It was thoughtless. Now, about the house. The house is non-negotiable," I said. "It's being sold. The paperwork is final. But where will we live? That's for you and Derek to figure out, just as I've figured out my own housing all these years. Her composure cracked slightly. My parents won't help. They think this whole situation reflects poorly on them. For a moment, I glimpsed something almost vulnerable beneath her polished exterior. Fear, perhaps. The fear of losing status, of being seen as less than. I recognized it because I'd spent a lifetime feeling it too. I know something about difficult parents, I said, softening slightly. And about pride. This isn't about pride, she snapped. It's about survival. No, I corrected gently. It's about consequences. You treated me like I was disposable. Derek allowed it. Now you're learning that I wasn't disposable after all. She stood abruptly. Keep Nico then, at least until we figure out our next steps. It's probably better for him anyway. As she walked away, Nico approached cautiously. What did she say? She said you can stay with me for now. His relief was palpable. Did she apologize? In her way, I said, not wanting to burden him with the full truth of his mother's limitations. It's a start. That evening, as we ate the lasagna I'd made from my mother's recipe, Nico asked, "What happens after the foreclosure? To us, I mean." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. We'll figure it out. Together. For the first time in decades, together felt like a word I could trust again. The moving truck arrived at 7 a.m, 3 men efficiently loading what remained of my life into cardboard boxes. I stood in the kitchen drinking tea from the single mug I'd kept unpacked, watching as 47 years in one place was dismantled in less than 3 hours. Nico helped direct the movers, his height and youth earning immediate respect. "Ms. Driscoll, where would you like this?" One of the men held up Robert's fishing tackle box. "The precious pile, please," I answered. We'd created 3 categories: everyday essentials, precious memories, and furniture. The precious pile was the smallest, just a few boxes containing photographs, Derek's childhood art, and the small remnants of Robert I'd never been able to discard. Patrice arrived midway through the process, bearing breakfast sandwiches and strong coffee for the workers. "Old rule," she explained when I tried to reimburse her. "Always feed people who carry heavy things." By 11, my apartment stood empty, the faded outline of picture frames on walls, the impression of my bed frame in the carpet. I walked through each room one final time, my footsteps echoing in the emptiness. So many quiet nights, so many silent tears, so many small triumphs celebrated alone. "You okay, Grandma?" Nico appeared in the doorway of what had been my bedroom. "Just saying goodbye," I replied, running my fingers along the notches in the door frame where I'd marked Derek's height each birthday. "Are you sad to leave?" I considered this carefully. Not sad, exactly. Thoughtful. This place held me during the hardest years of my life. He nodded, understanding more than a 17-year-old should need to. The new place will be better. Different, I corrected. Better is something we create, not something we find. Outside, the moving truck waited. Patrice had already driven ahead to the new apartment to direct the unloading. When I handed my keys to the building manager, he seemed surprised. 17 years, and not a single late payment, he said. Wish all my tenants were like you, Lorraine. I smiled politely, not telling him that those on-time payments had sometimes meant skipping meals or medicine. Working-class dignity came with its own quiet sacrifices. The drive to my new place took exactly 12 minutes. Past the factory where I'd worked, now converted to luxury condominiums. Past the park where Derek had learned to ride a bicycle. past the high school where I'd attended every one of his basketball games. The familiar landmarks slid by like scenes from someone else's life now. My new apartment building had a small courtyard with actual flower beds, tulips nodding red and yellow in the spring breeze. The garden-level unit meant just 3 steps down from the main entrance, manageable for my knees, even on bad days. Inside, sunlight streamed through windows that faced east. Morning light, my favorite kind. The movers worked efficiently, following my directions about which furniture went where. My old sofa looked surprisingly right in the new living room. My kitchen table, the one where I'd helped Derek with homework for 12 years, fit perfectly in the breakfast nook. By late afternoon, the bones of my new life were assembled. "Mom's called 6 times today," Nico said as we unpacked kitchen items. "Dad twice." "Have you answered?" He shook his head. "Not ready yet." I understood. Sometimes silence was the only boundary strong enough to protect yourself. "They'll need to know where you are eventually," I said gently. "You're still a minor. I know. Just not yet." We worked in companionable silence until the kitchen was functional. Plates in cupboards, silverware in drawers, the ancient coffee pot in its place of honor by the sink. When Patrice announced she was ordering pizza for dinner, it felt almost like a celebration. "To new beginnings," she said, raising her paper cup of cheap red wine she'd brought in a thermos. "And to leaving garbage in the garage where it belongs." Nico snorted, then laughed outright, the first real laugh I'd heard from him in days. I joined in, the release of tension almost dizzying. After dinner, when Patrice had gone home and Nico was setting up the new internet router, I sat on my small patio, watching night settle over the courtyard. My cell phone rang. Derek again, the 5th call today. This time, I answered. "Mom." His voice sounded rough, exhausted. "Finally? Hello, Derek? Is Nico still with you? Camilla said she saw him. He's here. He's safe." A pause. "Can I talk to him?" "That's up to him." Another pause, longer this time. "The bank officially denied our extension request. We have to be out by the end of the month." "I know. Mr. Muir told me." "Mom, I don't understand how you can do this to us. To your own family." The old guilt rose in my chest. The automatic assumption that a mother's role was to sacrifice, to absorb pain, to make things easier for her children, regardless of cost. I'd lived by that creed for decades, but not anymore. "I didn't do this to you, Derek. You did this to yourselves when you treated me like someone whose feelings didn't matter." "It was one stupid brunch." "No," I said calmly. "It was years of taking my help while gradually erasing me from your lives. Years of letting Camilla treat me with contempt. Years of watching you choose her comfort over my dignity. The brunch was just the final insult." He was quiet so long I thought he might have hung up. Finally. "We have nowhere to go." "That's not true. You have options. Just not the ones you want. Camilla's pregnant." The words tumbled out in a rush. 12 weeks. We were going to announce it at the shower. The news hit me like a physical blow. Another grandchild. Another life that would be shaped by the patterns we created now. "Congratulations," I said softly. "Mom, please. We need the house. For the baby. For Nico. Nico is welcome to live with me for as long as he needs. As for the baby..." I took a deep breath. "I will always be a grandmother to your children, but I will never again be a doormat to their parents." After we hung up, I sat motionless, watching the stars appear one by one above the courtyard. Another grandchild. The thought brought both joy and apprehension. Would this child also grow up learning that Grandma was someone to be tolerated rather than respected? Would I watch history repeat itself? Nico found me there an hour later, still contemplating the night sky. "Dad called me," he said, settling into the chair beside mine. "Told me about the baby. How do you feel about that? Being a big brother?" He shrugged. Weird timing. We sat in silence, the evening growing cooler around us. Finally, Nico spoke again. "He asked if I would talk to you, try to change your mind about the house." "And what did you say?" "I told him you don't change your mind once it's made up." I smiled faintly. "You know me well." "I've been watching you my whole life," he said simply, "even when they weren't." Those words, that acknowledgement of having been truly seen, filled something in me that had been empty for too long. The next morning, a bouquet of daisies arrived, my favorite flower, though I couldn't remember ever telling Derek that. The card read simply, "I'm sorry. Not just for Sunday, for everything." D. I placed the flowers in a vase on my new kitchen table, their sunny faces brightening the room. An apology wasn't a solution, but it was a beginning. 3 days later, Derek called again. He and Camilla had found an apartment, smaller than what they were used to, in a less prestigious neighborhood. They were moving the following weekend. "Will you at least keep some of the furniture for us?" he asked. "We can't fit it all in the new place." "No," I said gently but firmly. "Clean breaks are best. And Nico? He's welcome with me as long as he wants, though he should visit you too." The day they moved out of the house, I drove past, not to witness their departure, but to say goodbye to the place that had represented so much of my sacrifice. The moving truck was already gone. The "for sale" sign stood prominently in the yard. In the empty driveway, I could almost see the ghost of myself arriving for that Mother's Day brunch, hands full of carefully wrapped scarves, heart full of hope. Nico stayed with me throughout the summer, his presence filling my new home with the energy that only youth provides. He registered for his college classes, applied for scholarships, and gradually rebuilt a cautious relationship with his parents. Each Sunday, he had dinner with them at their apartment. Each Sunday night, he returned to me with small reports. "Dad's looking for a better job. Mom's actually cooking now. They've stopped fighting so much." In late August, a week before he was to leave for college, Nico came home from their apartment with a small box. "Dad wanted you to have this," he said, setting it on my kitchen table. Inside was a framed photograph I'd never seen. Derek as a child, maybe 7 or 8, asleep on my lap while I read a book, my hand absently stroking his hair. One of Robert's rare photographs, written on the back in Derek's adult handwriting. "He never forgot how safe he felt with you." The note underneath read, "Mom, I can't change what happened, but I can learn from it. We're trying to be better. All of us. Thank you for loving Nico when we failed him, and thank you for teaching me, finally, about respect. Love, Derek." It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was acknowledgement of my humanity, my worth, my right to be treated with dignity. For now, that was enough. The day Nico left for college, we stood in the parking lot of his dormitory, surrounded by nervous parents and excited freshmen. He hugged me tightly before gathering his bags. "I'll call you every Sunday," he promised. "I know you will." As I drove home alone, I realized I was smiling. My new apartment waited. Cozy. Mine. Filled with only the memories I chose to keep. My savings account held enough for security, for small pleasures, for helping Nico when he truly needed it. My dignity remained intact. The garage that had once held me was empty now. The house that had consumed my retirement was being sold to a young family who would fill it with their own stories. And I, Lorraine Driscoll, 72 years old, and finally free, was driving toward a future where giving would always be a choice, never an expectation. Some would call it revenge. I called it justice. The quiet justice of a woman who had finally learned to value herself as much as she had always valued others. Up next, we have 2 more incredible stories that are waiting for you. Just click the image you want to watch and it will talk.